The message arrived on every screen across Earth at the same moment. Billions of people stopped what they were doing and stared at the holographic image of Supreme Commander Rolth, his insect-like features twisted into what humans assumed was satisfaction. His four eyes gleamed with certainty as he spoke through the translation device. Humans of Earth, your time of reckoning has arrived. The Galactic Assembly has voted unanimously. Your species poses a threat to civilized space. You have 48 hours to surrender all military assets and submit to coalition authority. Refuse, and your world will be reduced to ash. The transmission ended. Silence fell across the planet for exactly 3 seconds before chaos erupted. Admiral Trent Hawkins watched the message from the command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the edge of the console hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Around him, officers scrambled to confirm what their sensors already told them. 10,000 alien warships had entered the solar system. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of 73 vessels, most of them barely tested in combat. "Get me Ambassador Reed and Dr. Okoye," Hawkins said quietly, "and someone find out exactly how long we have before they reach firing range." A young officer with sweat beading on her forehead looked up from her station. "Sir, at their current speed, they'll be in position to attack in 36 hours. "We have less time than they claimed." Hawkins nodded slowly. He had expected as much. The coalition didn't get to rule half the galaxy by playing fair. Across the planet, Ambassador Davis Reed stood in the empty chamber of the United Earth government. The other delegates had fled to shelters or to be with their families. Reed understood the impulse, but someone had to stay and try to talk their way out of extinction. He activated the long-range communication array and requested a direct channel to the coalition flagship. It took 20 minutes before Commander Rolth's face appeared on the screen. The alien commander looked almost amused. "Ambassador Reed, have you come to discuss terms of surrender?" "I've come to ask why," Reed said, keeping his voice steady. "Humanity has violated no treaties. We've honored every agreement since we joined the galactic community 40 years ago. Why declare war now?" Rolth's mandibles clicked together in what the translation software labeled as a laugh. "You really don't understand, do you? That's what makes you so dangerous. Explain it to me." The alien commander leaned closer to his own screen. "Every species that reaches the stars does so by following certain patterns. They develop technology in predictable ways. They solve problems using established methods. They fight wars according to rules developed over millions of years of galactic history." He paused. Then humanity arrived and ignored every single pattern. Reed frowned. "We've been peaceful traders. We've shared our discoveries. You solved the quantum bridge problem in 3 weeks," Rolth interrupted. "A mathematical puzzle that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy for 2,000 years. You didn't solve it using advanced computing or superior intelligence. You solved it because one of your scientists got drunk and decided to approach it backwards. That's not a crime," Reed protested. "You escaped the Ravager pirate fleet last year using a maneuver that violated 17 fundamental laws of space combat. The maneuver worked perfectly, even though every simulation said your ship should have been torn apart. You terraformed the toxic moon of Barnard 6 in 5 years using techniques that other species would take centuries to develop. You did it by combining mining equipment, atmospheric processors, and bacterial cultures in ways that made no logical sense. Yet it worked." Ralph's voice grew harder. "Do you know what the Coalition war computers predict for this battle? They give us a 99.9% chance of victory. But those same computers cannot predict what insane strategy your species will attempt. That uncertainty is intolerable. Better to eliminate the variable now while we still can." The transmission ended before Reed could respond. 1,500 miles above Earth's surface, Dr. Nina Okoye floated in the zero gravity of Outpost 7. The research station had been built in secret over the past 3 years, hidden among the orbital debris and defunct satellites that cluttered Earth's upper atmosphere. Official records listed it as a weather monitoring platform. In reality, it housed humanity's most desperate scientific project. Okoye pulled herself along the handrails toward the central chamber where her team worked frantically to complete the final preparations. She was a physicist, not a soldier, but she understood what was at stake. The Coalition had superior numbers, superior weapons, and thousands of years of military experience. Earth couldn't win a fair fight, so they had spent 3 years trying to create an unfair one. "Status report," she called out as she entered the chamber. Her lead technician, A nervous man named Paul Chen looked up from his console. We're 70% complete, maybe 75. The quantum matrix is stable, but the probability anchors keep fluctuating. If we activate now, there's a 40% chance the whole thing just explodes. And if we don't activate at all, there's a 100% chance we all die, Okoye replied. Keep working. We have 36 hours. Chen nodded and returned to his calculations, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Okoye allowed herself a moment to look out the observation window at the blue and white sphere. Below, Earth, home. Humanity had clawed its way up, from caves and primitive tools to reach the stars, surviving ice ages, plagues, wars, and near-extinction events. They hadn't come this far just to surrender to aliens who were afraid of unpredictability. Her communicator chimed. Admiral Hawkins appeared on the small screen. Doctor, I need to know if your project will work. Okoye took a breath before answering. Honestly, Admiral, I don't know. The theory is sound. We've run thousands of simulations, but we've never tested it at full scale, and the energy requirements are enormous. We're essentially weaponizing probability itself. In plain English, please. We're building a chaos field. If it works, everything inside it becomes unpredictable. Systems fail in impossible ways. Low probability events happen constantly. Order breaks down. She paused. The coalition fights using careful planning and calculated tactics. We're betting that drowning them in chaos will level the playing field. Hawkins was quiet for a moment. And if it doesn't work? Then we die quickly instead of slowly. Not much of a difference, really. The Admiral almost smiled at that. I'm giving the evacuation order for all major cities. Military personnel are to remain at their posts. We'll make our stand, Doctor. You just give us the weapon to stand with. Understood, sir. The transmission ended. Okoye turned back to her team, watching them work with desperate intensity. Humanity had always been good at two things: adapting to impossible situations and making up new rules when the old ones didn't work. Now they would find out if those talents were enough to save them from an enemy that controlled half the galaxy. Outside the station, invisible to human eyes, the Coalition fleet continued its inexorable advance. 10,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a city with a single shot. Behind them, 47 alien species waited to see if the troublesome humans would finally be brought to heel. Humanity had 48 hours to prove them wrong. The countdown had begun. Council member Farah spread her wings in agitation as she watched the holographic display of the human homeworld. The avian diplomat had argued against this war from the beginning, not out of sympathy for humanity, but because she understood something her colleagues refused to acknowledge. Humans were dangerous precisely because they didn't play by the rules everyone else followed. You're making a mistake, she said to the assembled coalition leadership. We should negotiate, not attack. Supreme Commander Rolth turned his compound eyes toward her. The decision is made. The fleet advances. Humanity will submit or perish. Do you even understand what you're dealing with? Farah demanded. Have you actually studied their history? I've read the reports, Rolth replied dismissively. They are technologically inferior, militarily weak. The war computers give us overwhelming odds of victory. Your precious computers don't account for human insanity, Farah muttered, but she knew it was useless. The coalition had committed to this course. All she could do was watch and hope she was wrong about the outcome. On the coalition flagship, Rolth reviewed the intelligence files on humanity one more time. He wanted to understand his enemy, even if victory seemed certain. The more he read, the more he understood why the Assembly had voted for war. These creatures were genuinely disturbing. Humans had evolved on a death world. That alone wasn't unusual. Many warrior species came from dangerous planets. But Earth was dangerous in ways that created a specific type of survivor. The planet had tried to kill humanity through ice ages, meteor strikes, volcanic eruptions, diseases, and predators. Humanity responded to each extinction-level threat by adapting and growing stronger. They developed agriculture during an ice age. They built civilization while competing with large carnivores. They created global trade networks after plagues killed a third of their population. The pattern was clear. Every time something tried to destroy humanity, they learned from it and came back more dangerous than before. Rolth pulled up a specific incident from 3 years ago. A human merchant ship called the Second Chance had been ambushed by Ravager pirates in the Outer Rim. The pirates were experienced, their ships were faster, and they outnumbered the human vessel 5-1. By every calculation, the humans should have been captured or destroyed within minutes. Instead, Captain Ann Wu had done something that still made military analysts across the galaxy shake their heads in disbelief. She had deliberately flown her ship into the gravity well of a nearby gas giant, using the planet's powerful magnetic field to disrupt the pirates' targeting systems. Then she had vented her ship's cargo, which happened to be industrial fertilizer, creating a massive cloud of debris that blocked sensors. While the pirates fumbled in the artificial fog, Wu used the gravity slingshot to accelerate to dangerous speeds and escaped. The maneuver violated 17 established principles of space combat. It should have been impossible. The gravitational forces should have torn the human ship apart. The fertilizer cloud should have been too dispersed to block military-grade sensors. The acceleration should have killed everyone on board, but it worked. The pirates never even got a clear shot. When Coalition analysts studied the battle, they realized something disturbing. Captain Wu hadn't planned that maneuver in advance. She had improvised it in the middle of the fight, making split-second decisions that ignored everything she had been taught about proper naval tactics. She had looked at the rules of engagement and decided they didn't apply to her situation. That was the human problem in a nutshell. They didn't just break rules. They seemed to be fundamentally incapable of accepting that rules were mandatory. Ralph closed that file and opened another. This one detailed the quantum bridge problem, a mathematical puzzle that had challenged the finest minds in the galaxy for 2 millennia. The problem dealt with reconciling quantum mechanics with large-scale physics, a theoretical issue that prevented the development of certain advanced technologies. Hundreds of species had worked on it. The greatest computing systems had analyzed it. No one could solve it. Then Dr. Nina Okoye, a human physicist, solved it in 3 weeks. She didn't use superior technology or revolutionary new mathematics. According to the report, she had gotten drunk at a research conference, started doodling on a napkin, and approached the problem backwards. Instead of trying to make quantum mechanics work with large-scale physics, she assumed both were wrong and created a third framework that reconciled them. Her colleagues thought she was joking at first. The solution was too simple, too elegant. It violated several established theorems, but when they tested it, the solution worked perfectly. Overnight, it opened up entire new fields of research. Technologies that had been theoretically impossible became achievable. The galactic scientific community was still arguing about the implications. Ralph moved to the next file. The terraforming of Barnard 6, a toxic moon that humanity had transformed into a livable world in just 5 years. Standard terraforming took centuries. It required careful planning, precise atmospheric adjustments, and gradual biological introduction. Humans had ignored all of that. They had crashed ice asteroids into the moon to create water. They had used mining explosives to crack open the crust and release trapped gases. They had dumped billions of tons of bacteria, algae, and other microorganisms onto the surface without testing for compatibility. They had even used nuclear weapons to jumpstart volcanic activity and create a magnetic field. Every expert predicted disaster. The ecosystem would collapse. The atmosphere would become toxic. The whole project would fail spectacularly. Instead, it worked. The various organisms competed, adapted, and eventually created a stable, if somewhat chaotic, biosphere. The moon now supported human colonies and was producing food for export. Scientists were still trying to figure out why the ecosystem hadn't collapsed as predicted. Rolf leaned back in his command chair and tried to analyze the pattern. Humans didn't just think outside the box. They seemed to be unaware that boxes existed. They approached every problem with a combination of creativity, recklessness, and stubborn refusal to accept impossibility. When told something couldn't be done, they took it as a personal challenge. More disturbing, they seemed to thrive on chaos and uncertainty. While other species built stable, predictable systems, humans created redundant, flexible structures that could adapt to unexpected circumstances. Their ships had more backup systems than primary ones. Their battle plans included provisions for when the plans failed. Their entire military philosophy seemed to be built around the assumption that nothing would go according to plan. How did you fight an enemy that expected failure and planned for chaos? Ralph checked the tactical display. The Coalition fleet was maintaining perfect formation as it advanced toward Earth. Every ship knew its position. Every weapon was calibrated. Every maneuver had been planned and rehearsed. The attack would proceed with clockwork precision. The war computers had calculated every variable and determined the optimal strategy for overwhelming Earth's defenses. It was all very orderly, very predictable, and very logical, which meant the humans would probably try something completely illogical in response. Rolf felt something he hadn't experienced in his long military career: uncertainty. Not about winning the battle. The numbers were overwhelming. Earth couldn't possibly stand against 10,000 warships, but uncertainty about what insane strategy the humans would attempt before the end. On the human homeworld, cities evacuated in surprisingly orderly fashion. Despite the panic, despite the fear, people followed the emergency procedures. They helped each other. They shared resources. They faced the end with the same stubborn determination that had carried their species through every previous crisis. Ambassador Reed watched the evacuation reports and felt a surge of pride mixed with grief. Humanity had survived so much, come so far. It seemed impossibly cruel that they would be destroyed now, just as they were beginning to explore the galaxy. Destroyed not for any crime, but simply because other species were afraid of their unpredictability. He thought about Captain Wu and her impossible escape. He thought about Dr. Okoye solving an ancient puzzle by ignoring the rules. He thought about the terraformers who had turned a toxic rock into a living world through sheer audacity. Maybe that was humanity's real strength. They had never learned to accept defeat gracefully. They had never developed the wisdom to know when a fight was hopeless. They kept struggling, kept adapting, kept trying impossible things until something worked. It was a terrible survival strategy by any logical measure. But somehow it had carried them from caves to the stars. Reed wondered if it would be enough to carry them through one more impossible situation. In 30 hours they would find out. The countdown continued. Time had run out. Admiral Hawkins stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing the coalition fleet in perfect attack formation. They had stopped just outside weapons range, a wall of alien warships that stretched across the darkness of space like a metal moon. Every sensor confirmed what everyone already knew. Earth's 73 ships faced an enemy they couldn't possibly defeat in conventional combat. Incoming transmission from the coalition flagship, an officer reported. Hawkins nodded. Put it through. Supreme Commander Rolf appeared on the main screen, his insectoid features unreadable to human eyes but his posture radiating confidence. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship bustled with activity as final preparations for battle continued. Admiral Hawkins, your planet has exhausted the time we granted. I will now demonstrate coalition mercy one final time. You have exactly 30 seconds to transmit your unconditional surrender. If we do not receive it before the deadline expires, we will begin our attack. There will be no further warnings, no additional chances. 30 seconds, Admiral. Choose wisely. The screen split to show a countdown timer. The numbers began their inexorable march towards 0. 30 seconds, 29, 28. Around the command center, officers looked at their admiral waiting for orders. Some faces showed fear. Others showed grim determination. None showed any willingness to surrender. Hawkins took a breath and opened a private channel to Outpost 7. Dr. Okoye, what's your status? Above Earth's atmosphere, Nina Okoye grabbed a handhold as another power surge rocked the station. Warning lights flashed across every console. The quantum matrix at the heart of their weapon was barely stable, held together by constant adjustments from her exhausted team. They had worked without sleep for 36 hours straight, pushing the technology beyond any safe limits. We're as ready as we'll ever be, she replied, her voice hoarse. The probability field generators are charged. The quantum anchors are locked on the coalition fleet. But Admiral, I need you to understand what we're about to do. This isn't just a weapon. It's reality manipulation on a massive scale. Once I activate it, there's no shutting it down safely. The field will expand until it either collapses naturally or tears itself apart. Will it work? Okoye looked at her lead technician, Chen, who was making final calculations. He glanced up and gave her a shaky thumbs up. Theoretically, yes. We're about to make Murphy's Law into an actual physical force. Everything that can go wrong for the coalition fleet will go wrong. Systems will fail. Equipment will malfunction. Random chance will turn against them. She paused. But it affects us too. We're weaponizing chaos, Admiral. Chaos doesn't pick sides. 20 seconds remained on the countdown. If we're going to die anyway, I'd rather die trying something crazy than kneeling, Hawkins said. Stand by to activate on my command. He closed that channel and opened another to the human fleet. 73 ships scattered around Earth in defensive positions, each one hopelessly outmatched. Each one crewed by people who had volunteered to stand between their home and annihilation. All ships, this is Admiral Hawkins. I won't lie to you. The odds are terrible. But since when have humans let odds stop us? We're about to try something that no one has ever attempted before. Something that shouldn't work according to every law of physics and warfare, which means it's probably going to work perfectly. Scattered laughter came through the channel. Nervous but genuine. When the signal comes, execute your maneuvers exactly as briefed. Don't worry if it seems insane. Insanity is what we do best. And if this is our last stand, let's make it one that the galaxy remembers forever. Hawkins out. 15 seconds. On the Coalition flagship, Rolf watched the countdown with satisfaction. The humans had made no attempt to communicate. No pleas for mercy. No last-minute surrender. He respected that at least. They would die with dignity. All ships prepare to fire on my command, he ordered. Target major population centers first. Make it quick. His tactical officer confirmed the orders. 10,000 ships armed their weapons simultaneously, creating energy readings that blazed across every sensor in the solar system. 10 seconds. Council member Farah watched from her own ship, positioned safely behind the main battle line. She had a terrible feeling about this entire operation, but couldn't articulate why. The humans had no secret weapon, no hidden fleet, no alien allies. They were alone and outnumbered. Victory was certain. So why did she feel like something was about to go catastrophically wrong? 5 seconds. Lieutenant Beth Foster sat in the cockpit of her fighter, one of hundreds deployed from Earth's defense ships. She had been a test pilot before the war started, someone who volunteered for the most dangerous experimental flights. Everyone thought she was crazy. She thought everyone else was boring. Now, as she prepared to execute a maneuver that defied every safety protocol ever written, she felt a strange calm. Well, she muttered to herself, at least I won't die wondering what would have happened if I'd played it safe. 3 seconds. Dr. Okoye's hand hovered over the activation control. Her team had stopped working, all eyes on their own countdown. Everything they had built, all the theory and calculation and desperate hope came down to this moment. Either they had created something revolutionary, or they had built an expensive way to die. 2 seconds. Admiral Hawkins opened a channel to the Coalition fleet. Just before the deadline expired, Earth transmitted its response. Not a surrender. Not a plea. Just 7 words that would echo across the galaxy. Did you really think we wouldn't improvise? 1 second, Hawkins gave the signal. Dr. Okoye, activate. 0. Okoye slammed her hand down on the control. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then Outpost 7 lit up like a small star. Energy readings spiking off the scale. The quantum matrix activated, sending invisible waves cascading outward at faster-than-light speeds. The probability field expanded in a perfect sphere, engulfing the Coalition fleet, Earth's defense ships, and the entire inner solar system in less time than it took to blink. Reality hiccuped. On the Coalition flagship, Rolf gave the order to fire. His tactical officer reached for the weapons control and watched in disbelief as the console sparked, flickered, and died. Around the bridge, other systems began failing in rapid succession. Navigation, communications, life support alarms, backup power, what's happening? Rolf demanded. His technical crew scrambled to diagnose the problems but couldn't find any logical explanation. The systems weren't damaged. They weren't being jammed. They were simply failing for no apparent reason, one after another, like dominoes falling in an impossible pattern. Across the Coalition fleet, the same scene repeated 10,000 times. Weapons that had been maintained perfectly for decades suddenly developed critical malfunctions. Navigation computers calculated impossible coordinates. Communication systems broadcast static. Engineering reported fires, coolant leaks, and power surges from equipment that had been functioning perfectly seconds earlier. A Coalition cruiser's main gun fired without orders, nearly hitting a friendly ship. A destroyer's navigation system sent it drifting toward a collision course with 3 other vessels. A carrier's fighter bay doors opened spontaneously, exposing the interior to vacuum and forcing an emergency containment response. Everything that could go wrong was going wrong. All at once across the entire fleet. Human ships weren't immune. Foster watched her fighter's primary systems die, throwing her to backup power. But human ships were designed with redundancy, built into every system. Backup systems had backup systems. When those failed, crew members improvised repairs using whatever they had available. The chaos was still chaos, but humans had trained to function in chaos. They expected nothing to work properly. They planned for disaster, which meant they could still fight. Dr. Okoye, watching from Outpost 7 as her instruments went haywire, allowed herself a grim smile. The weapon worked exactly as predicted. She had turned the battlefield into a zone where probability itself had broken down, where order gave way to chaos, where the carefully calculated certainties of galactic warfare dissolved into random chance. The coalition had come prepared to fight a war. Instead, they found themselves fighting against reality itself. And reality, weaponized by humans, was winning. Supreme Commander Ralph had commanded fleets for 40 years. He had fought in 17 major campaigns and emerged victorious from every one. He had studied warfare since he was old enough to understand tactical displays. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for what was happening to his fleet. "Status report," he barked, trying to maintain control as his flagship's bridge descended into barely controlled chaos. His tactical officer was physically hitting the console, trying to get it to respond. "Sir, I don't understand. The weapon system shows green across all boards. But when I input firing commands, nothing happens. It's not a power issue. It's not a software glitch. The systems are working perfectly. They're just not doing what I tell them to do. Then override manually. I tried, sir. Manual controls are also unresponsive, but not broken. They're just ignoring orders." Across the bridge, similar reports came in from every station. Life support was cycling randomly between too hot and too cold. Gravity generators kept flickering on and off. The ship's AI kept announcing contradictory status updates. None of the failures were critical yet, but combined, they were paralyzing the entire vessel. Ralph pulled up fleet-wide communications and immediately wished he hadn't. The channel was flooded with emergency transmissions from hundreds of ships, all reporting similar impossible malfunctions. A battleship's navigation system had plotted a course directly into a star and couldn't be overridden. A carrier reported that its fighter launch systems were working perfectly, but launching fighters in random directions. A cruiser's reactor was running hot despite all cooling systems functioning normally, as if physics itself had decided to ignore proper heat transfer. It was madness. "All of it was madness. Get me Admiral Hawkins," Ralph demanded. "Whatever the humans are doing, we need to—" The communication system chose that moment to die completely, leaving him staring at a blank screen. On Earth, Admiral Hawkins watched the chaos unfold through sensors that were themselves flickering in and out of reliability. Even with the probability field affecting everyone equally, the humans were adapting faster. Their ships had been designed by a species that expected nothing to work properly, by engineers who built backup systems as a matter of course and trained crews to improvise. "Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from coalition ships," an officer reported. "Some are requesting assistance. Others are just broadcasting automated emergency beacons." Hawkins made a decision that would define how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations to come. "All ships, this is the Admiral. Begin rescue operations. Any coalition vessel broadcasting distress is to be treated as a priority target for aid, not attack." His officers looked at him in surprise, but quickly moved to implement the orders. Lieutenant Foster guided her fighter through the chaos, its backup systems keeping her airborne even as the primary controls remained stubbornly dead. She spotted a coalition cruiser that had lost maneuvering control and was drifting toward a debris field. Following the Admiral's orders, she flew close enough to transmit docking coordinates for Earth rescue ships. The coalition crew, expecting an attack, instead received rescue vectors. The confusion that followed was almost comical. Dr. Okoye monitored the quantum field from Outpost 7, making constant adjustments to keep it from collapsing entirely. Her hands flew across controls that sometimes responded and sometimes didn't, compensating for the field's chaotic nature with the same chaos. It was like trying to control a wildfire by setting more fires, but somehow it worked. "How long can we maintain this?" Jen asked. sweat dripping down his face despite the station's malfunctioning temperature control. Until the field collapses naturally, or until we run out of power, or until random chance decides to explode us. Okoye replied with dark humor. Could be minutes. Could be hours. The math stopped making sense about 10 minutes ago. So we've weaponized something we can't control that affects us as much as the enemy, and might kill us all regardless of who wins? Welcome to human warfare, Okoye said with a tired smile. We never claimed it was smart. Just effective. On the Coalition flagship, Rolth finally managed to establish a video link to Earth through a communication laser that was somehow still functioning. Admiral Hawkins appeared on his screen looking tired but composed. Commander Rolth, Hawkins said before the alien could speak. I think we need to talk. What have you done? Rolth's voice was a mixture of anger and genuine confusion. What kind of weapon is this? It's not a weapon in the traditional sense, Hawkins replied. It's a probability field. Dr. Okoye can explain the physics better than I can, but essentially, we've created a zone where unlikely events become likely. System failures, malfunctions, random chance turning against you, everything that could go wrong will go wrong. Rolth processed this information. That's impossible. You can't weaponize probability. You're currently experiencing it, Commander. I'd say it's very possible, but it must be affecting your ships as well. It is, Hawkins admitted. But here's what you didn't understand about humans. We expect things to break. We plan for chaos. Our entire military doctrine is built around the assumption that nothing will work as intended. So when reality itself becomes unpredictable, we're actually operating in our preferred environment. The alien commander was silent for a long moment, processing this. His tactical training had included hundreds of scenarios, thousands of battle plans. None of them covered what to do when your enemy weaponized chaos itself. None of them addressed how to fight when your own equipment became your enemy. This is insane, he finally said. Yes, Hawkins agreed. That's the point. You came here with superior numbers, superior technology, and superior experience. You fought the war you knew how to fight. We couldn't win that war, so we changed what kind of war we were fighting. Welcome to asymmetric warfare, human style. Rolth looked at his own failing bridge systems, at the reports still flooding in from his paralyzed fleet, at the human ships that were somehow still operating, despite the same chaos affecting them. He had made a catastrophic error in judgment. The Coalition had prepared to fight humanity's military. They hadn't prepared to fight humanity's fundamental nature. Council member Farah managed to establish contact with her ship's diplomatic corps. I need someone to explain to me how we lost a war we should have won in under a minute. One of her analysts pulled up a display showing comparative military philosophy. The Coalition fights wars through superior organization and overwhelming force. We calculate optimal strategies and execute them with precision. It's how we've dominated the galaxy for millennia. Obviously, Farah said impatiently. Get to the point. Humans don't fight that way. They studied our methods and identified the critical weakness. We rely on complex systems that must work in harmony. Our ships, our weapons, our tactics all depend on reliable, predictable performance. Humans built their doctrine around unreliable, unpredictable performance. They expected failure and planned around it. The analyst brought up footage of human fighters still operating despite catastrophic system failures. Crews jury-rigging repairs with materials never intended for that purpose. Pilots navigating by dead reckoning when instruments failed. When the humans created a weapon that made everything unpredictable, they neutralized every advantage we had. Our superior numbers mean nothing if the ships can't coordinate. Our advanced weapons mean nothing if they won't fire. Our experience means nothing because no one has experience fighting in controlled chaos. Farah spread her wings in a gesture of defeat. We brought a calculator to a bar fight. Essentially, yes. Ambassador Reed received the communication from Admiral Hawkins with a mixture of relief and amazement. You actually pulled it off. Dr. Okoye pulled it off, Hawkins corrected. I just gave the order. Now comes the hard part. We need to negotiate before this field collapses and reality returns to normal. I'm sending you access to the command channel with Rolth. Make this count. Reed took a breath and opened the channel to the Coalition commander. The alien looked defeated, confused, and more than a little angry. Commander Rolth, I believe we have something to discuss. You want us to surrender, Rolth said flatly. No, Reed replied, surprising the alien. We want you to recognize that we're not your enemy. We're just different. You declared war because we don't follow your patterns. But Commander, the galaxy is big enough for multiple patterns. Humanity doesn't want to conquer. We don't want to rule. We just want to exist without being forced to conform to someone else's expectations. Rolth's mandibles clicked together in thought. You could have destroyed us. This weapon of yours has paralyzed our fleet, but instead of attacking, you're rescuing our ships. Because we're not monsters, Reed said simply. We built this weapon to defend ourselves, not to commit genocide. We're willing to shut it down right now if you'll agree to withdraw and open genuine negotiations. The alien commander looked at his chaotic bridge, at his paralyzed fleet, at the human ships providing rescue assistance to coalition vessels. He had come here believing humans were a threat that needed to be eliminated. Instead, he had learned that humans were something far more dangerous and far more valuable than he had imagined. They were survivors who turned every disadvantage into an advantage, who looked at impossible situations and found improbable solutions, who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. The galaxy needed that kind of thinking, even if it was terrifying. I will recommend to the Coalition Assembly that we accept your terms, Rolth said finally. On one condition, name it. Teach us how you do this. How you think like this. How you turn chaos into a weapon instead of a weakness. Reed smiled. Commander, I think that's the beginning of a beautiful partnership. The probability field collapsed 6 hours after it had been activated. Reality snapped back into place like a rubber band released, and across the battlefield, systems that had been failing randomly suddenly stabilized. Weapons came back online. Navigation systems recalibrated. Communications cleared. The chaos that had paralyzed 10,000 ships faded as quickly as it had appeared. But everything had changed. Dr. Okoye collapsed in her chair as the quantum matrix finally powered down. Her team sat among smoking consoles and burnt-out equipment, exhausted beyond words. They had maintained the impossible for 6 hours, constantly adjusting, compensating, and improvising to keep the field stable. Now it was done, and she felt like she had run a marathon while solving complex equations. Did we win? Chen asked weakly. Okoye checked the communication channels and saw something unexpected. Human and coalition ships working together to rescue damaged vessels. Diplomatic channels open and active. No weapons firing. No hostilities. I think we did something better than winning, she replied. I think we taught them something. On the coalition flagship, engineering crews swarmed through corridors making repairs. The damage wasn't physical. Every system had simply experienced the galaxy's worst luck simultaneously. Now that the probability field was gone, everything worked again. But the experience had shaken every crew member to their core. Supreme Commander Rolth stood on his repaired bridge and composed his report to the Coalition Assembly. How did you explain losing a war in 30 seconds? How did you tell the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy that they had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by weaponized chaos? He settled on honesty. We lost because we prepared to fight the war we knew how to win. The humans prepared to fight the war we couldn't imagine. They studied our doctrine, identified our dependence on complex systems and coordinated tactics, and built a weapon specifically designed to neutralize those advantages. More importantly, they built their entire military philosophy around thriving in chaos while we built ours around eliminating chaos. He paused, thinking about the human ship still operating when his own fleet was paralyzed. The humans didn't beat us with technology. They beat us with attitude. They expect failure and plan around it. They embrace unpredictability instead of fearing it. They see rules as guidelines rather than absolute laws. These qualities make them dangerous, yes, but they also make them potentially valuable allies. Ambassador Reed floated in zero gravity outside Outpost 7, watching repair crews work on the damaged station. Dr. Okoye had invited him up to see the weapon that had saved Earth. Now, looking at the burnt-out quantum matrix, Reed understood why she had been so hesitant to use it. This thing could have killed us all, couldn't it? He asked. Okoye nodded. The probability field doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone inside it equally. We survived because we're better at dealing with chaos, not because we were immune to it. And there was about a 30% chance the whole matrix would have exploded during activation, taking the station and probably a large chunk of Earth's orbital space with it. So we bet everything on a weapon that had a 1 in 3 chance of killing us immediately. Would you rather we had surrendered? Reed laughed. When you put it that way, suddenly 30% odds seem pretty good. That's the human way, isn't it? Take the crazy risk because the alternative is worse. It's kept us alive for a few 100,000 years, Okoye replied. Might as well keep doing what works. They floated in comfortable silence for a moment before Reed spoke again. The Coalition wants to know how we think, how we approach problems. Rolf specifically asked if we would share our methods. What did you tell him? I said we'd be happy to, but I warned him it might not work for them. Our methods only work because of who we are, because of how we evolved, because of every disaster that almost destroyed us and made us stronger instead. Reed gestured at the damaged station, at Earth below, at the scattered Coalition fleet. We don't have an instruction manual for being human. We just are. Down on Earth, cities were being repopulated as civilians returned from shelters. The evacuation had been massive, chaotic, and surprisingly organized given the circumstances. People had helped each other. Strangers had shared resources. Communities had pulled together facing what they thought was the end of the world. Now they returned to find their world still intact, the alien fleet withdrawing peacefully, and news spreading that humanity had just won a war most people hadn't even known was happening. Captain Ann Wu received a message from Admiral Hawkins requesting her presence at the negotiation talks. She was confused until she read the details. The Coalition wanted to meet the human who had escaped the Ravager pirates using tactically impossible maneuvers. They wanted to understand how she had done what their computer said was impossible. Wu laughed when she read that. How did you explain intuition? How did you teach someone to look at a hopeless situation and ask, what if I just tried something crazy? How did you make people understand that sometimes the best plan was to have no plan and just react? She composed her response carefully. Tell them I'd be happy to talk, but they're not going to like what I have to say. I didn't use some secret human technique. I just refused to give up and tried something stupid. It worked because I got lucky. That's not a strategy you can teach. But even as she wrote it, Wu knew that wasn't entirely true. Luck favored the prepared. She had survived because she knew her ship inside and out, because she understood physics even if she was willing to bend the rules, because she had experience thinking fast under pressure. The stupid maneuver had actually been the result of years of training, instinct, and refusal to accept defeat. Maybe that was what the Coalition needed to learn. Not specific tactics or techniques, but the fundamental attitude that no situation was truly hopeless if you were willing to try something unconventional. Lieutenant Foster was promoted to Captain Foster in a brief ceremony at Earth Defense Command. Admiral Hawkins himself presented her with the new rank insignia. You maintained combat effectiveness when your primary systems were completely dead, Hawkins said. You used backup systems, manual controls, and pure piloting skill to continue operations. You even assisted 3 Coalition fighters that had lost control. That's exactly the kind of thinking that won this war. Foster accepted the promotion with pride, but also with a question. Sir, did we really win? I mean, we didn't destroy the enemy fleet. We just confused them really badly. Hawkins smiled. Captain, what's the objective in any war? To defeat the enemy, sir. Wrong. The objective is to achieve your political goals. Our goal wasn't to destroy the Coalition. It was to survive and maintain our independence. We accomplished that. We did it without massacring millions of aliens, without creating eternal enemies, and without compromising who we are as a species. I'd call that a better victory than simply blowing them out of space. Foster thought about that and nodded. So we won by changing what victory meant. Exactly. That's the most human thing possible. When you can't win the game, change the rules. Council member Farah met with Ambassador Reed in neutral space aboard a diplomatic station. She wanted to understand what had happened from a human perspective, without military complications or political posturing. Why didn't you destroy us? She asked directly. You had the advantage. You could have annihilated the fleet while it was helpless. Reed looked at her with genuine surprise. Because we're not genocidal maniacs. We built that weapon to defend ourselves, not to commit mass murder. The moment you stopped being a threat, you became people who needed help. It's that simple. It's not simple at all, Farah replied. Most species would have taken revenge. You had every justification to destroy us after we threatened your entire world. And then what? We'd be the species that massacred a helpless fleet. We'd be the monsters you thought we were. We'd prove that the Coalition was right to fear us. Reed shook his head. We didn't want to be feared. We wanted to be understood. There's a difference. Farah spread her wings in a gesture of respect. You know what the Assembly is calling this now? The 32nd War. Because technically, You defeated us in the 30 seconds between our ultimatum expiring and our fleet becoming paralyzed. Catchy name, Reed said with a smile. It's already becoming legend. The humans who refuse to surrender. The weapon that shouldn't exist. The fleet brought low by its own complexity. Every species in the galaxy is going to study this battle for the next 1,000 years. Let me guess, they're all trying to figure out how to counter our probability weapon? Some are, Farah admitted. But others are asking a different question. They're wondering what other impossible things humans might accomplish. What other rules might be flexible. What other certainties might not be so certain after all. You didn't just defeat a fleet, Ambassador. You challenged the fundamental assumptions that have guided galactic civilization for millions of years. Reed considered that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know yet, Farah said honestly. But I know it's going to be interesting. The galaxy has been stable for a long time, maybe too stable. Maybe we needed someone to come along and shake things up. Someone to remind us that the rules we follow aren't laws of nature. They're just agreements we made, and agreements can change. She looked at him with what might have been amusement. Congratulations, humanity. You've graduated from dangerous newcomers to disturbing philosophical influence. I'm not sure which is worse for our peace of mind. Reed laughed at that. Welcome to dealing with humans. We're going to make you uncomfortable, challenge your assumptions, and do things that shouldn't work but somehow do. But we'll also stand by you when things get difficult. Help you think outside the box and never, ever give up on a problem just because it looks impossible. That's either a promise or a threat, Farah observed. It's both, Reed replied. That's what makes it human. 6 months after the war that wasn't really a war, Admiral Hawkins stood in the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Hall on Earth. The building represented everything that had changed since that day when 10,000 alien ships had come to destroy humanity. Now those same aliens sent delegations to trade, learn, and build partnerships. The coalition had officially recognized Earth as a sovereign world with full assembly membership. More than that, the assembly had granted humanity permanent observer status on the military council with an unusual caveat. Human representatives could veto any declaration of war until other diplomatic options were exhausted. It was a level of authority, usually reserved for species that had existed for millions of years, granted to humans who had been in space for only 40 years. Ralph approached him across the hall, moving with the careful dignity of someone who had learned humility the hard way. The alien commander had been reassigned to serve as liaison between the coalition fleet and Earth's defense forces. It was officially a diplomatic position. Unofficially, everyone knew he was there to learn how humans thought about warfare. Admiral, Ralph greeted him. The session is about to begin. Are you prepared? Hawkins nodded. As prepared as I can be for my first major diplomatic event. Fighting wars is easier than negotiating treaties. I'm not certain I agree anymore, Ralph replied. I used to think warfare was simple. Superior force applied to strategic targets. Victory achieved through overwhelming odds. Then I met humanity and realized I understood nothing. We didn't invent anything new, Hawkins said. We just refused to accept the limitations everyone else took for granted. They walked together toward the assembly chamber, an odd pair that had become surprisingly common in recent months. Former enemies learning to work together, finding common ground in shared experiences and hard-won respect. Dr. Okoye was dismantling the quantum matrix when she received unexpected visitors. A delegation of coalition scientists had requested permission to observe the weapon's decommissioning. She had agreed, curious to see their reaction to the technology that had defeated their fleet. The lead scientist, a crystalline being named Seth, examined the burnt-out equipment with something approaching reverence. This is incredible. The mathematics alone should have taken decades to develop. The engineering challenges should have been impossible. Yet you built it in 3 years with minimal resources and no precedent. We were motivated, Okoye replied dryly. Nothing focuses the mind like existential threat. But how did you even conceive of weaponizing probability? The concept is so fundamentally chaotic that most species would dismiss it as theoretical fantasy. Okoye thought about how to explain it. Humans have a saying. If something exists, someone will eventually weaponize it. Fire, wind, atoms, information, gravity. We look at every force of nature and ask not can we control it, but how can we use it? Probability was just another force waiting to be harnessed. Seth pulsed with colors that the translation software labeled as amazement. You realize this changes everything. If probability can be manipulated, then half the assumed constants of physics might be negotiable. Your species has opened up entirely new fields of study. Before you get too excited, Okoye cautioned, you should know that this thing nearly killed us all. The mathematics are unstable. The power requirements are enormous, and controlling chaos is like trying to grab smoke. It only worked because we were desperate enough to try something insane. Insane, Seth repeated thoughtfully. That word appears frequently in descriptions of human achievement. Do you realize that? We're aware, Okoye said with a smile. We consider it a compliment. Chen approached with a tablet showing the final decommissioning checklist. Dr. Okoye, we're ready to begin the safe dismantling process. Are you sure you want to destroy it? This technology could be valuable. Okoye looked at the quantum matrix, at the weapon that had saved Earth but could have destroyed them just as easily. No one should have this power. Not us, not the Coalition, not anyone. We built it because we had to, but keeping it would just make everyone afraid again. Better to prove we're not interested in galactic conquest by giving up our biggest advantage. Seth observed the dismantling with interest. You're destroying your own superweapon voluntarily. Again, very unexpected behavior. We're full of surprises, Okoye replied. Get used to it. Captain An Wu found herself in the unusual position of teaching tactics to Coalition military officers. She stood in a simulation room on a Coalition training station, surrounded by dozens of alien pilots eager to understand the impossible maneuvers she had used to escape the Ravager pirates. The key, she explained for the 10th time, is accepting that your plan will fail. Every plan fails. Combat is chaos, so instead of making a perfect plan, make a flexible plan that can adapt when everything goes wrong. One of the Coalition officers, a reptilian species named Rel, raised a hand. But Captain, your escape maneuver violated fundamental principles of navigation. You should have been torn apart by gravitational forces. Should have, yes. But I wasn't. You know why? Because I didn't think about what should happen. I thought about what I needed to happen and figured out how to make it possible. Wu pulled up the simulation of her escape. Look here. I used the gas giant's magnetic field not because it's traditionally a useful navigation tool, but because it was available and I needed to disrupt the pirates' sensors. I used fertilizer as chaff not because that's what it's designed for, but because that's what I had in my cargo hold. I made it up as I went along. That's not a technique, Rel protested. That's random luck. No, Wu corrected. It's prepared improvisation. I knew my ship. I knew physics. I knew my enemy. When the normal tactics failed, I had enough knowledge and experience to try something abnormal. That's what you need to learn. Not specific tricks, but how to think creatively under pressure. She ran the simulation again. Try it yourselves. I'll play the pirates. You try to escape using any method you can think of. Don't worry about following proper procedure. Don't worry about doing things by the book. Just survive. The Coalition pilots hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the lack of structure. Wu smiled. This was going to be an interesting lesson for everyone involved. Lieutenant Foster, now Captain Foster, led a mixed squadron of human and Coalition fighters on a training exercise. The Coalition had requested joint training operations to help their pilots learn human tactical flexibility. Foster had volunteered to lead one of the first mixed units. All wings, this is Foster. Today's exercise is simple. We're escorting a convoy through a simulated pirate ambush. The pirates will outnumber us 3-1 and have superior positioning. Standard Coalition doctrine says we should maintain defensive formation around the convoy. We're not doing that. She could almost hear the confusion from the Coalition pilots on her channel. Instead, we're going to do something chaotic. Human pilots, you know the drill. Coalition pilots follow our lead and try to keep up. Remember, there's no such thing as a bad idea in combat. Only ideas that don't work. If something fails, try something else. Ready? Break formation on my mark. The simulation began. Pirates appeared on sensors exactly as predicted. Foster immediately ordered her squadron to scatter in 12 different directions, abandoning the convoy entirely. The Coalition pilots hesitated, then reluctantly followed orders. The pirates, expecting a defensive formation, found themselves facing targets moving in unpredictable patterns. They split their forces to chase individual fighters, breaking their own coordination. Foster's squadron picked off isolated pirate ships one by one, while avoiding direct confrontation with the main groups. The convoy reached its destination with minimal damage. The pirate force was scattered and demoralized. The exercise was technically a success, but Foster could sense the confusion from her coalition pilots. "Debrief in 5 minutes," she announced. "I want to hear everyone's thoughts on what we just did." In the debrief room, a coalition pilot named Tara spoke first. "Captain Foster, that was tactically unsound. We abandoned our primary objective to chase secondary targets. The convoy was left vulnerable." "Was it destroyed?" Foster asked. "No, but that was luck." "Was it luck, or was it because the pirates couldn't coordinate an attack while dealing with 12 separate threats coming from random directions?" Foster pulled up the tactical replay. "Look at their formation. They expected us to cluster around the convoy. When we didn't, they had to make split-second decisions about which target to prioritize. They chose poorly because we gave them too many choices too quickly. That's not luck. That's strategy." Another coalition pilot spoke up. "But what if we had encountered a commander who adapted to our tactics?" "Then we would have adapted to their adaptation," Foster replied. "That's the point. We don't have one strategy. We have 100 strategies, and we pick the one that works in the moment. You can't predict what we'll do because we don't know what we'll do until we do it." Tara's head tentacles waved in agitation. "That's chaos." "Yes," Foster agreed. "Controlled chaos. It's uncomfortable, I know. But it's effective. You don't have to like it. You just have to learn to function in it." Ambassador Reed sat across from Council Member Farah in a cafe on the diplomatic station. They had developed an unlikely friendship over the past 6 months, bonding over shared frustration with bureaucracy and the challenges of explaining human thinking to the broader galaxy. "I received an interesting proposal today," Farah said, sipping a beverage that Reed couldn't identify. "A newly contacted species called the Fel wants to establish relations with the galactic community. The Assembly is debating how to approach first contact. Someone suggested we let humanity lead the diplomatic mission." Reed nearly choked on his coffee. "We've been in space for 40 years, and they want us to handle first contact for a new species? That seems risky. On the contrary, it seems logical. The Fel are technologically primitive but culturally complex. They have 7 different governments on their homeworld, all with conflicting ideologies. Traditional coalition diplomacy would try to unify them under a single galactic representative, but several Assembly members suggested that humans might take a different approach. "You want us to teach them our chaos philosophy?" Reed said, understanding. "You think because we're comfortable with complexity and contradiction, we might be better at dealing with a fractured civilization?" "Precisely. The Coalition spent millennia trying to create order and stability. You've spent 6 months teaching us that some disorder is healthy. Perhaps the Fel need that perspective more than they need forced unity." Reed considered the implications. "This is a test, isn't it? The Assembly wants to see if human diplomatic methods work as well as our military ones." Farah spread her wings in acknowledgement. "Everything humanity does is being watched and analyzed right now. You've disrupted galactic thinking in ways we're still processing. This is an opportunity to prove your methods have value beyond warfare. And if we fail, then we learn from the failure and try something else. Isn't that the human way?" Reed laughed. "You've been paying attention. All right, I'll recommend Earth accept the assignment, but I'm bringing Dr. Okoye and Captain Wu. If we're going to teach aliens to embrace complexity, we might as well bring our best chaos agents." The galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Trade routes that had been static for millennia were being revised based on human suggestions about flexible logistics. Military academies were adding courses on adaptive tactics and improvisation. Scientific research was exploring formerly theoretical concepts because humans had proven that theoretical didn't mean impossible. Admiral Hawkins gave his address to the Galactic Assembly, aware that billions of beings across hundreds of worlds were watching. He had never been comfortable with public speaking, but some moments required it. 6 months ago we were at war. The Coalition came to destroy us, believing we were too unpredictable to be trusted. They were right about us being unpredictable, but wrong about what that meant. Yes, we don't follow the established patterns. Yes, we do things that shouldn't work according to conventional wisdom. Yes, we make other species uncomfortable with our refusal to accept limitations. But that's not a weakness. It's strength born from necessity. He paused, looking at the assembled representatives from dozens of species. Humanity survived and reached the stars because we learned to adapt to impossible situations. We learned that rules are guidelines, not chains. We learned that chaos isn't something to fear but something to harness, and now we're offering to share those lessons with anyone willing to learn. We're not trying to replace your methods. We're not claiming our way is the only way. We're just showing you that there are more possibilities than you thought, more solutions than you imagined, more ways to succeed than the ones written in your military manuals and diplomatic protocols. Hawkins smiled. The 30-second war taught us all something important. It taught you that humans are dangerous, but dangerous doesn't mean evil. It taught us that the galaxy is bigger and stranger than we imagined. Most importantly, it taught everyone that assumptions can be questioned, rules can be bent, and impossible problems can have impossible solutions. He concluded with words that would become humanity's unofficial motto in galactic affairs. We're here to disturb your peace of mind, challenge your certainties, and occasionally do things that make you wonder if we're insane. But we're also here to stand by you, help you think differently, and never give up on problems that seem unsolvable. That's what it means to be human. That's what we offer the galaxy. Take it or leave it. The assembly erupted in discussion. Some species applauded. Others protested. Several delegations immediately requested more information about human methods. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and completely unexpected. In other words, it was perfectly human. Dr. Okoye watched the address from Outpost 7, which had been rebuilt as a research station for studying exotic physics. She had refused several offers to recreate the quantum weapon, instead focusing on the peaceful applications of probability manipulation. If they could weaponize chaos, surely they could also harness it for useful purposes. The galaxy would adjust. Some species would embrace human thinking, others would resist it, and most would awkwardly try to find a middle ground. That was fine. Humanity didn't need everyone to agree with them. They just needed the freedom to be themselves and help others see possibilities they had missed. The future was uncertain, unpredictable, and full of potential problems. For humanity, that sounded like home. The 30-second war was over. The next chapter of galactic history was beginning. And for the first time in millions of years, no one was quite sure what would happen next. That uncertainty was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy.